It happened in seconds. The boy in the crisp blazer had dropped something, a notebook maybe, and dashed across the street without looking. His father's SUV door hadn't even closed yet. The sidewalk buzzed with morning noise. Engines. Footsteps. No one noticed. Except one. Eli Carter was sitting across the street, legs crossed, a paper cup by his side, half full with coins and pity. He saw the boy run. He saw the black SUV turning fast. He saw no time for thinking. So he moved. Fast. Barefoot, breath sharp. He sprinted into the street and shoved the rich kid hard toward the curb. The impact sent Eli flying. The boy landed safely, scraped but alive, eyes wide in shock. Then came the scream. "Get off my son." A tall man in a tailored suit ran forward and grabbed Eli by the arm, yanking him off the pavement like a rag doll. His voice was sharp, panicked, loud enough to turn heads. Eli winced but didn't fight back. "I wasn't hurting him," he said, barely above a whisper. "I was." "Dad, stop," the other boy cried. "He saved me. He pushed me. He saved me." Everything went still. The man froze. His hand loosened. His face drained. People around them, silent just moments before, began to murmur. "He saved that boy. Did you see that? That kid, he jumped in without even thinking." Eli looked down. His shirt was torn. His palms were bleeding. And still, he didn't move. He just glanced at the man and said, "He almost got it. That's all." He didn't ask for thanks. He never did. Would you stop for a stranger? Would you risk everything for someone who has everything? This is just the beginning of Eli's story. But what would you have done in that moment? Tell us where you're watching from, and whether you've ever witnessed a kindness that changed everything. Because sometimes, the smallest act rewrites an entire future. Eli's day started with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses against your ribs, heavy and unmoving. At 10 years old, he already knew how to fold a blanket on concrete, how to tell if someone was going to offer food or just another look of pity, and how to walk with confidence even when your stomach was hollow. He lived behind a faded green dumpster behind a convenience store on 6th and Porter. The manager didn't love him there, but Eli always cleaned up after himself. He never made a mess, and that seemed to buy him another day, every day. He didn't beg loud. That never worked. Instead, he sat with a cup and a worn cardboard sign that read, "Not looking for pity, just trying to eat." Most people walked by. Some tossed coins. Others glanced, guilty. A few muttered things they'd never say to a man in a suit. But Eli didn't get angry. He watched. He learned. At night, he kept a pocket notebook, something he'd found in a trash bin, where he'd draw the people he saw. Not just faces, postures. The tired slump of a janitor's shoulders. The rush in a man's steps after his phone rang. A woman who cried in her car for exactly 4 minutes before wiping her eyes and driving off. He didn't know their names, but he memorized their movements. Because sometimes, all he had was time. And noticing made him feel human. There was a rhythm to the street. The guy who always dropped a banana, but never looked him in the eye. The bus driver who slowed down just enough for Eli to wave at her. The old woman who wore 2 coats and still shivered, but gave him her gloves one morning and never took them back. Eli kept the gloves, even in July. They reminded him that people were still capable of surprise. He rarely spoke unless spoken to. When he did, he was polite. Always "Yes, ma'am," or "Thank you, sir." He called the security guard at the bank, Mr. Thomas, because he once heard someone else say it. And the man smiled when Eli used it. He earned trust with his quiet. There were days he got nothing. No food. No coins. Just looks. On those days, he'd sleep early, chew a piece of gum for dinner, and whisper a line he made up for himself. "I'm not invisible. I'm just between moments." The phrase became his anchor. He said it when it rained too hard, when police told him to move, when his legs ached from sitting still too long. He said it most often when he saw other kids, clean, laughing, pulled along by impatient parents who never noticed him sitting 10 feet away. He never envied them, but he did wonder how it felt to be expected somewhere, to be someone's reason to rush. Every Sunday morning, He'd walk 3 blocks to the public library. Not to read. He couldn't read well yet. But he liked the quiet, the smell, the stillness. He liked watching people choose stories. One librarian, Miss Chan, started letting him sit in the corner, near the window. She never asked why he was always alone. She just said, "You've got the eyes of someone who listens. That's rare." She once gave him a peanut butter sandwich and a book about drawing. It was the nicest thing anyone had ever done for him. He read it cover to cover, slowly. It took him 3 weeks. But when he finished, he drew a portrait of Miss Chan's cat from memory. She framed it and put it on her desk. Eli smiled for a whole week after that. The city was cold in the early hours. Not always by weather, but by indifference. But Eli knew how to make the world warmer. He'd pull gum wrappers from gutters, push shopping carts back to the corral. He once returned a dropped wallet, untouched, to a man who couldn't meet his eyes afterward. He didn't do those things to be noticed. He did them because they were right. And sometimes, doing something right, even when no one sees it, was the only way to stay human. At night, when the city finally hushed, Eli would lay on his thin blanket, pull his knees to his chest, and listen to sirens, wind, footsteps. He didn't have a family photo. No stories of back when. But he remembered a woman's voice, soft and warm, that used to hum to him before the world changed. He didn't know if she was real. Maybe a dream. Still, on the hardest nights, he'd close his eyes and whisper, "I'm trying, Mom." And then, always, "I hope you be proud." That morning, the one with the SUV and the boy and the moment that changed everything, it wasn't special. Not to start with. He'd woken up with a cramp in his leg. The blanket was damp. His stomach grumbled. He'd walked toward the corner like always. Set the cup down. Saturday. Just another day. Until he saw a boy, same age, same height, different world. Fancy blazer. New shoes. Hair combed just so. Running into the street. And without thinking, because his body always knew how to move before fear caught up, Eli got up. Ran. Shoved. Fell. The world turned upside down. But Eli had been training for this his whole life. Because when you spend every day watching others, you learn exactly when to step in, even if no one's watching you. The ambulance came fast, but not fast enough to erase the look on Mr. Thornhill's face when he realized what he'd done. He hadn't just grabbed a kid. He'd grabbed a hero. Eli sat on the curb, holding his ribs, watching strangers crowd around the boy he'd saved. Lucas, the boy in the blazer, kept pointing. "He saved me," he said again. "He pushed me out of the way." The paramedics checked Eli briefly, asking if he was dizzy, hurt, confused. He shook his head. "I'm okay," he said, though he wasn't sure that was true. Mr. Thornhill crouched beside his son, checking him from head to toe. "I thought." "It wasn't him, Dad. He saved me." There was a long silence. Then Mr. Thornhill looked at Eli. His expression had shifted, but it hadn't softened. "Why did you do that?" he asked. Eli blinked. "Because he was going to get hit." It wasn't a complicated answer, because it wasn't a complicated decision. But the man stared like he didn't quite understand. Someone from the crowd approached. A woman in scrubs. She'd seen it all. "That boy saved your son's life. You should be thanking him." More murmurs. Nods. Mr. Thornhill didn't respond. He stood, pulled out his phone, barked into it about bringing the car around, about calling someone named Elliot. Eli watched him walk away. The paramedic handed Eli a bandage and told him to sit still for a minute. Lucas broke away from his dad and sat next to him. "You really okay?" the rich kid asked. Eli nodded. "Just sore." Lucas looked at the sidewalk. "I've never seen anyone do something like that." Eli shrugged. Felt like the right thing. Lucas was quiet for a second. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a juice box. "Here," he said. "It's strawberry. The good kind." Eli took it, surprised. "Thanks." They sat in silence, sipping, while the world around them spun with too many voices and flashing lights. A few minutes later, the driver arrived. Mr. Thornhill called for Lucas. The boy stood, but looked back at Eli. "Maybe I'll see you again." Eli gave a half smile. "Maybe." And just like that, They were gone. The police took a quick statement, but there wasn't much to say. A kid got saved. The kid who saved him walked away. Eli left with no address, no contact, and no last name given. The news didn't run the story. No one took a video. By evening, the crowd had forgotten. But Lucas hadn't. Back at the mansion, he told the story again and again. The butler, the cook, his tutor, anyone who would listen. He ran. He didn't stop. He didn't even ask my name. Mr. Thornhill tried to dismiss it. He was probably just reacting. Don't make him a superhero. But Lucas wasn't letting it go. He didn't want anything. The next day, Lucas drew a picture of the moment, 2 stick figures, one pushing the other away from a car. He taped it to his wall. Eli, meanwhile, had gone back to the corner. Same blanket, same paper cup. Nothing had changed. His ribs ached. His shoulder was stiff. But no one noticed. No one said, "Hey, aren't you the kid from yesterday?" Because in a city like this, even miracles fade in 24 hours. By the weekend, Eli's stomach hurt more than his bruises. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The juice box had been the last thing. Still, he didn't move corners. He stayed there, because in some small part of him, he hoped maybe the boy would come back. He didn't. The gesture was over. Filed away. Forgotten. The next time Lucas saw Eli, it wasn't planned. He was riding in the back of his father's Tesla when he caught a glimpse of someone sitting cross-legged under the same tree. "Dad, stop." Mr. Thornhill flinched. "What? Why? Back there." That was him. Mr. Thornhill sighed. "Who?" "The boy. The one who saved me." The car pulled over reluctantly. Lucas hopped out and ran. "Eli." Eli looked up, surprised. "You remember my name?" "Of course I do." Lucas held out a paper bag. "My mom made lunch. I asked for an extra." Eli took it, confused, grateful. Mr. Thornhill watched from a distance, arms folded. He didn't get out of the car. That moment passed too. But that night, Lucas brought it up at dinner. He was still there. Same clothes. Same spot. Don't you think that's not right? Mr. Thornhill didn't answer. Lucas leaned in. "He could have died saving me. I don't think I'd be here if he didn't move." Finally, his father spoke. "You're right." Lucas blinked. "Wait, what?" "He saved you." Mr. Thornhill stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the lights of the city. "And I forgot." For the first time, Lucas saw something in his father's face that wasn't coldness. It was regret. Real quiet, hard to swallow regret. The next day, Mr. Thornhill made a call. Then another. He asked a private investigator to find out who the boy was. It didn't take long. "He's been on that corner 6 months, the man reported. "Orphan. No records. No school. No known relatives." Mr. Thornhill hung up and sat with that information for a long time. That night, he didn't sleep. He kept seeing the moment. The hands. The shove. The stillness after. He didn't know why it haunted him now and not before. But it did. Because kindness like that doesn't ask to be seen. And that's what makes forgetting it feel like betrayal. Eli wasn't used to voices yelling his name. Most people didn't even ask it. So when a black car pulled up to the curb 3 days later and a man in a suit stepped out calling, "Eli Carter?" it felt like hearing thunder in a library. Eli didn't answer right away. He gripped his cup tighter, unsure if he was in trouble. The man looked expensive, serious. His shoes clicked on the sidewalk like they belonged to someone who never had to walk slowly. "I'm with Mr. Thornhill," the man said, lowering his voice. "He wants to speak with you." Eli stood up slowly, cautious. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," the man replied. "He believes he did." They rode in silence. Eli kept the window cracked open, eyes darting between high-rise buildings and people who didn't notice him for once because he was inside the kind of car that didn't stop at lights unless it had to. When they pulled up to a tall glass building, the man opened the door and said, "Just follow me." Eli walked into a world of marble floors, elevator chimes, and desks where people wore headsets and didn't smile. He felt the cold in the air, not temperature, but tone. Mr. Thornhill was waiting in a room too large for one person, staring at a wall of city skyline. "You came," he said without turning. I was invited, Eli replied, shoulders square. Mr. Thornhill turned. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Do you know who I am? He asked. You're the father, Eli said, of the boy I pushed. That's one way to put it, Thornhill said quietly. You saved him, and I grabbed you. Eli shrugged. You were scared. You didn't even flinch, the man said. When I shouted, when I grabbed you, you just stood there. I've been grabbed before. That made Thornhill go quiet. A long pause filled the room. Then the billionaire walked to a table and picked up a folder. I asked someone to look into you, he said. I hope that's not crossing a line. Eli didn't respond. You've been on your own a long time, Thornhill added. Too long. Eli blinked, unsure if this was a test. Then Thornhill said something Eli didn't expect. I want to help, but not with a check, not with a press release. I want to know what you actually want. Eli stood very still, then said, somewhere to sleep that doesn't get wet. That's all. And school, Eli added, like it had just slipped out. I want to learn how to read better. Mr. Thornhill nodded. Okay. That could have been the end. But it wasn't. The next morning, Eli was back on the curb. Same spot. Same cup. Not because the offer wasn't real, but because the world had taught him not to trust quick kindness. He wanted to see if it would stick. But someone else came instead. Police. A different officer this time. Firm. Suspicious. Got a call. Said you were harassing people. Eli looked up. I'm just sitting. Show me ID. I don't have any. The officer sighed. Of course you don't. A crowd had started to form. Eli noticed a phone lifted in the air. Someone recording. Sir, please, Eli said. I didn't do anything. But the officer grabbed his arm anyway. And that was the moment. That was the line. Because Eli didn't resist, but he didn't comply easily either. He didn't collapse. He didn't cry. He just stood there, unflinching, while the officer pulled him off his blanket, until a voice cut through the tension. Let him go. Everyone turned. It was Lucas, standing there in a hoodie too clean for that street, clutching his phone, his voice loud and clear. He didn't do anything. That's Eli. He saved my life. The officer hesitated. Lucas turned to the crowd. You all saw what he was doing. Nothing. The crowd murmured. Someone said, yeah. Another nodded. Eli stood still, face burning. The officer let go. Lucas helped Eli gather his things. You okay? Not really, Eli said. But thanks. Lucas looked at him and said something simple. Come home. They walked to the car waiting nearby. Same driver. Same black coat. This time, Eli didn't sit stiffly. He leaned back, tired. At the house, the staff looked surprised, but not unkind. One woman brought him clean clothes. Another handed him a sandwich. Lucas gave him a tour. This'll be your room if you stay. And yeah, I kinda already told the school you're coming with me. Eli stopped walking. Why are you doing all this? Lucas shrugged. Because you jumped in front of a car. And because I want you to. That night, Eli slept in a bed for the first time in months. The mattress was soft. The blanket heavier than it looked. He stayed awake longer than he meant to, watching the ceiling, unsure if it was all going to disappear. But it didn't. In the morning, Mr. Thornhill met him at the kitchen table. I didn't understand you at first, he said, because I've never been where you've been. Eli nodded. But you stepped forward when everyone else froze. And that tells me you've got something I want around my son. What's that? Courage, Thornhill said, and a good heart. The first week in the Thornhill house was like stepping into a new language, one Eli could hear but didn't know how to speak. There were systems for everything. Breakfast at 7 o'clock sharp. Shoes off at the door. Tutors on Mondays and Thursdays. But no one raised their voice. That confused him most. In every other place he'd been, silence meant tension. Here it just was. A pause to think. Space to breathe. The house was big but not loud. The staff moved quietly. Lucas had his own wing, but he kept coming to Eli's room. You okay? Eli always nodded, but inside he wasn't sure. At night, he'd lie awake staring at the ceiling fan, waiting for it all to fade. It never did. He had his own toothbrush, his own drawer, a towel with his initials monogrammed. They embroidered it without even asking. Just in case. One mate had said, at school, everything was harder. Uniforms, hallways, schedules. People stared, not cruelly, but curiously. They knew who he was. Or at least, they knew the story. That's the kid who saved Lucas, the billionaire's new son. He wasn't sure which version he was supposed to be. So he stayed quiet. He answered when called on, ate his lunch slowly, watched. One day, in English class, the teacher handed out journals. Write about anything, she said. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just true. Eli stared at the page for 10 minutes before writing 3 words. I remember concrete. He closed the book. Didn't write anything else. Lucas found the journal that weekend, by accident. You draw in this? Eli shrugged. Sometimes. Lucas flipped through and froze. There were sketches, dozens of them. People on sidewalks. Faces caught mid-blink. A woman laughing into her hands. A man hunched over a sandwich like it was the last meal on earth. And in the center, a boy barefoot, kneeling next to a moving car. You drew me. I drew the moment, Eli said, so I wouldn't forget. Lucas was quiet, then asked, did it scare you? Eli paused. No. You could have died. I know. Then why? Eli didn't look up. He just said the words like he'd practiced them, because no one else moved. Lucas didn't ask again, but later that night, he told his dad, and something shifted. Mr. Thornhill didn't say much, but he started spending more time at home. Not awkwardly, just present. He'd pass by the den and ask Eli if he needed anything. Occasionally, he'd bring back a book, or print a sketch article. Never pushed, never prodded. One evening, Eli came downstairs and found him in the study. You were in the military, he asked. Mr. Thornhill blinked. Once, yes. You were afraid when you grabbed me. The man didn't flinch. Yes. Eli sat down. I wasn't, he added quietly. Thornhill nodded. I know. Silence stretched between them. Then Eli said something he'd never said out loud. I don't know who my father is. Thornhill turned fully toward him. Not with pity. With attention. My mother died when I was 7, Eli added. No other family. I think someone tried to help once. But I ran. I didn't trust it. Why are you telling me now? Because it's the only thing I've got that's really mine. And you let me keep everything else. Thornhill exhaled slowly. Do you want me to be your father? Eli looked down. Then up. I think I want to know if I can be someone's son again. That week, they went to the city clerk's office. Not with cameras. No press. No headlines. Just signatures. Just names. Eli Thornhill. It felt strange in his mouth, but right in his chest. Still, he didn't tell anyone at school. Not right away. He wanted to keep it. Just a little while, between him and the man who didn't ask for gratitude. Only respect. A few days later, Lucas found a new sketch in Eli's journal. It was the two of them, sitting on a curb, drinking juice. No car. No crowd. Just a quiet moment. You're getting good at these, Lucas said. I've been practicing. Why that one? Eli smiled. Because that's when I realized I wasn't just surviving anymore. It started small. A note on a locker. A question in the hallway. The sort of attention that never found Eli before. Not when he was on the streets, and not when he first stepped into Thornhill Academy. But now people noticed. They didn't know what to say at first. Some stared. Some whispered. Most just watched. It wasn't every day that a kid like Eli, no family history, no legacy name, suddenly walked the marble halls of the richest school in the state, wearing the same uniform, sitting in the same classrooms, sharing a last name with the man who built the technology most of their homes ran on. To them, it didn't add up. They asked questions behind cupped hands. Is he adopted? Did he win a scholarship? Why him? But none of them asked Eli directly. They just watched him move, quietly, calmly, like someone who'd learned to carry his whole life in a single backpack. He didn't correct the rumors. He didn't need to, because the truth had never been loud. The first time anyone really understood who he was. It came from something simple. A substitute teacher couldn't pronounce another student's name. The class laughed. Quietly, but enough. Eli raised his hand. "Ma'am, I think it's pronounced Anasa, not Anissa." The girl turned, shocked. He smiled. "She says it when she's on the phone. That's how her mom says it." That moment rippled. Not because it was heroic, but because someone noticed. Later that week, a classmate tapped Eli on the shoulder in the library. "You really used to live on the street?" Eli didn't flinch. "Yeah." "What was that like?" "Loud when it was quiet, cold when it was hot. Sometimes the sidewalk felt like the only honest thing in the world." The kid didn't know what to say, but he told others, and the story started spreading. Not just the accident, not just the rescue, the truth, the sketchbook, the gloves he still wore, the day he stopped a bully by simply standing next to the target without saying a word. People started to realize he was kind before anyone paid attention. He gave before anyone had anything to give him. It wasn't charity that brought him here. It was courage. One teacher pulled him aside after class. "I saw you sketching the lecture," she said. "That's how you take notes." "Yes, ma'am." "That's brilliant." She pinned one of his drawings to the bulletin board the next day. No name, no label, just truth in pencil and ink. Even the headmaster noticed. He invited Eli into his office and asked how he was settling in. Eli shrugged, still figuring it out. "Well," the headmaster said, "the board thinks you're a PR move. I think you're proof this place still has a soul." Eli didn't respond, but he walked taller that day. Outside of school, things shifted too. The security staff at the Thornhill building now greeted him by name. The doorman at the library kept a small jar of candies for Eli only. A local coffee shop framed one of his sidewalk drawings with a note, "From someone who saw the world clearer than the rest of us." The city hadn't changed, but it had started to remember. One evening, while riding in the back seat with Lucas, Eli saw a kid sitting where he used to sit, corner of 6th and Porter, knees tucked in, eyes scanning nothing. He asked the driver to stop, got out, walked over, sat down, didn't say much, just handed the kid a juice box, and sat with him. Lucas waited in the car for 15 minutes, then got out and joined them. For 30 minutes, they didn't say a word. When they left, the kid whispered, "Thanks." Eli just nodded. "You're not invisible." That weekend, Mr. Thornhill invited Eli into his study. "I have a favor to ask," he said. Eli nodded. "We're opening a scholarship, a small one, for kids like you. No interviews, just quiet work and heart." Eli blinked. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to name it." Eli thought for a long time, then said, "The hands that move first." Mr. Thornhill smiled. Perfect. The truth was no longer something Eli had to explain. It lived in how people greeted him, how they paused before dismissing someone, how they remembered that kindness never asks for attention, but it rewrites the entire room when it walks in. It was bound to happen. The moment the public found out who Eli really was, not just the storybook version, not the headlines, but the messy, unsupervised details, people started talking, loudly, and not always kindly. The story had spread, first through local news. Billionaire adopts boy who saved his son. Then into tabloids. From street to penthouse. Who really is Eli Carter? Then came the questions. Why him? Was it a stunt? Was this adoption even legal? One blogger went viral with a video. "Let's talk about power, privilege, and guilt." Another made a thread dissecting every known image of Eli. His shoes, his haircut, even how he looked too calm to have suffered. The internet did what it does best. It chewed him up and called it curiosity. Even at school, the tone shifted. Some students now asked things they wouldn't have dared weeks before. So, like, were you actually homeless? Did you sleep in trash cans? You know this is just temporary, right? Eli didn't answer. Not because he couldn't, but because some questions don't deserve truth. Lucas noticed. "You want me to say something?" he asked. Eli shook his head. "They'll forget." But they didn't. One parent called the school anonymously and said it wasn't safe, to have a child with no known family history in the academy. Another suggested Mr. Thornhill was using Eli for clout. Someone even left a note in his locker. Hero or hustle? We're not sure yet. Eli read it once, then shredded it. He told no one. But Mr. Thornhill found out anyway. A board meeting. A whisper in the hallway. A donor pulled funding out of concern. That night, Mr. Thornhill asked Eli to sit with him in the study. Did you know? He asked. Eli didn't answer. I should have protected you better. You gave me more than anyone ever did, Eli said. That's already too much. It's not, Thornhill said quietly. Not even close. For the first time in weeks, Eli looked afraid. What if they try to send me back? Mr. Thornhill leaned forward. There's no back. This is your home. They can't rewrite that. But the world kept trying. One article used the word street rat. Another called him a feel-good case masking deeper issues. A podcast host questioned if he had the temperament for legacy responsibility. Eli turned off the internet for a week. But offline, the pressure didn't stop. One morning, the principal pulled him aside. We're getting calls, he said gently. Not about anything you did. Just assumptions. Eli braced himself. We're not kicking you out, the principal added quickly. But I wanted you to know that you're being watched. He already knew that. He'd been watched his whole life. But never like this. That night, he packed a small bag. Just a hoodie. A sketchbook. The juice box Lucas gave him. He left a note. Thank you for everything. But I don't want to make trouble. He got as far as the gate before Lucas stopped him. You really thought we'd let you leave? Eli didn't cry, but his voice cracked. I don't want to be someone's argument. You're not, Lucas said. You're someone's brother. Mr. Thornhill appeared behind them. No more disappearing, he said. If they want to fight. He paused. We tell the truth. So they did. The next day, Thornhill called a press conference. No PR team. No notes. Just a father and his sons. He didn't ask for this, Thornhill said. He didn't beg. He didn't stage anything. He saved my child and asked for nothing. That is more legacy than anything I've ever built. He looked directly at the cameras. If this disqualifies us from your support, fine. We'll build something better without you. That clip was shared 1 million times in 48 hours. Not because it was polished. Because it was human. The backlash didn't disappear. But it changed direction. People who had been quiet now spoke up. An old librarian shared a photo of Eli from months ago. Caption: He didn't have shoes, but he had kindness. A street vendor said Eli once gave her his only blanket. The corner where he used to sit became a mini memorial. Not because he died, but because his dignity had been attacked, and people finally noticed. At school, someone apologized. Another followed. Lucas made stickers that said, "Start with respect." They ended up on notebooks, lockers, even car bumpers. Because the story couldn't be rewritten. Not anymore. The truth was simple. Eli didn't come from power. He came from purpose. And that was harder to break. It began with a comment on a class blog. Not from a teacher. Not from a student. From a janitor. He wrote, Eli once stayed late after school and helped me clean the entire cafeteria after a food fight. No one told him to. No one saw. I never forgot. The post wasn't long. It didn't trend. But it didn't need to. By the next day, more appeared. A librarian. He used to sit in the back corner and return books other kids hid under shelves. Quietly. Every week. A former bus driver. He helped a woman carry her groceries up 3 flights of stairs when he couldn't have been more than 8 years old. A woman from the shelter. He gave his place in line to an older man when food ran short, then waited 3 hours for seconds that never came. And then the flood began. Voices from nowhere. From before the press, the podcasts, the suspicion. They weren't loud. They were steady. A teacher from a public school he only visited once. He asked if he could sit in the back and draw. I let him. At the end of class, he gave me a sketch of my face. Said, "You look tired but kind." I still have it. A crossing guard. He thanked me every morning for being there. I thought he was someone's kid. Turns out, he just believed no job should go unnoticed. Even a food truck owner wrote in. One night he sang for change. Not for attention, just for warmth. We gave him fries. He gave us a song I still hum to this day. It spread, not like wildfire, like roots, underground, quiet, strong. People began adding to the school's courtyard wall, little notes, folded memories, small acts. Each one began with, I saw him, and ended with, he didn't know I was watching. Lucas created a digital board online called Because of Eli. Within 48 hours, over 1,200 stories were submitted. A woman wrote, he helped me find my dog when she slipped her leash. I never knew his name until now. A father wrote, he sat with my son when he had a panic attack in a public park. Just sat, held his hand. I thought he was a volunteer. Another student posted, he noticed I was being followed, walked next to me and said, my brother's picking me up too. We'll wait together. He wasn't, but he stayed. The posts became impossible to ignore. News stations picked them up, not because they were explosive, but because they were undeniable. Even critics went silent. There was no scandal, no catch, just goodness, small and persistent, finally given a microphone. The school created a scholarship, not in his name, at his request. Instead, they called it the First to Move Fund. For students who act before the crowd does. A journalist reached out for an exclusive. Eli declined. I don't want to talk about myself, he said. The reporter asked, then what do you want to say? Eli thought for a long time, then said, I just want people to remember that no one's too small to matter. You don't have to change the world. Just keep someone from falling. The quote headlined the article anyway. It wasn't meant to inspire, but it did. A group of college students organized a Kindness Chain Day. They did anonymous good for strangers and left a note, because someone did it for me first. City Hall announced a public mural to honor invisible helpers. Eli didn't attend the unveiling. He was at the hospital, holding the hand of a woman who once fed him on Thanksgiving when no one else did. He visited her every week now. When she passed, he paid for her funeral. Not because he had to, because he remembered. People began to say things like, I want to be like Eli. But Eli didn't want fans. He wanted mirrors. People who'd see a stranger and step forward, just like he did. Kindness was never supposed to return. That's what made it real. That's what made it his. Eli had spent years giving with no receipts, offering warmth, protection, time, or dignity in exchange for nothing. Not thanks. Not recognition. Just the quiet knowledge that he'd left the world slightly less cold. But then, it started coming back. Not all at once. Not loudly. But steadily. Like rain after drought. It came in notes slipped into his locker. You made me feel seen. Thank you for the bench spot. You helped me breathe. It came in the form of returned favors he'd forgotten he gave. Someone left a sketchbook on his desk, one with expensive paper and a hand-lettered note, for the artist who made the world look kinder. Another day. His shoes disappeared during gym class, only to be replaced by a pair that fit better, clean and warm, with a tag that read, We noticed. One Saturday morning, the doorman at Thornhill Tower handed him a package. Inside was a drawing, one of his early sidewalk sketches. Framed. Laminated. He hadn't seen it in years. The note said, You gave me this when I couldn't afford a mirror. You reminded me I was still here. Eli didn't remember giving it, but he remembered the moment, the person, the weight they carried in their shoulders. It came back in smiles, in nods, in people stepping aside to let others pass first. Lucas noticed it most. Everyone walks softer around you now, he said. Eli shrugged. Maybe they just stopped running past everything. Lucas shook his head. No, you changed something. Mr. Thornhill started seeing it too. Investors who once questioned the adoption sent handwritten cards. Staff members shared stories about how Eli checked in on them long before he had anything to offer. The world, it seemed, had decided to return what it once overlooked. One day, Eli walked past the spot on 6th and Porter, the corner where he used to sleep. It had changed. Someone had cleaned the wall, painted a mural, not of him, but of hands. Open hands. Holding light. Below it, a plaque read, "This place held a boy who saved a life, and never asked for one in return." He stood there a long time. A woman approached with a small child. "Are you?" she began. Eli nodded once. She didn't ask for a selfie. She didn't ask for a story. She just said, "You helped my brother. Years ago. He's okay now." Then she handed him a sandwich. "From both of us." It tasted like memory. At school, the headmaster called him into his office. "We're building something," he said. "A mentorship program. For new students. Kids who feel out of place." Eli tilted his head. "You want me to help?" "No." The headmaster smiled. "I want you to lead it." Eli blinked. "You're not a figurehead here, Eli. You're a foundation." He accepted. A week later, he sat in a room with 5 students, nervous, quiet, not sure what to expect. Eli said, "This isn't a lesson. This is a landing place. You don't have to belong yet. You just have to be." One of the students cried. Eli offered a tissue, then drew their face. Not cartoonish, not exaggerated. Just seen. They smiled. The next day, 3 more showed up. By the end of the month, it became the school's most attended group. Not because Eli had the answers, but because he had presence. And sometimes that's all a person needs. Lucas turned 11 in spring. He asked for a small party. "I just want people who know me," he said, "not who know my name." He invited Eli's old librarian, the coffee cart lady, the first person who ever called Eli sir. They came. They brought baked goods, handmade cards, photos. Mr. Thornhill looked around and said, "This is better than any gala I've ever hosted." Eli looked at Lucas. "Happy birthday," he said. Lucas grinned. "Feels like it belongs to all of us." One morning, a letter arrived. No return address. It read, "I watched you grow up from the bench across the street. I didn't know how to help back then. I was scared. But you helped anyway. I hope this finds you well." Enclosed was $200 in cash, and a photo of the same bench, empty, but still warm. That night, Eli took the money and bought sleeping bags. He gave them to the shelter he once waited outside of. "I don't need change," he said. "I need continuity." They nodded. They knew. By summer, Eli was speaking to small groups, not as a celebrity, but as a classmate, a brother, a reminder. He told them, "Kindness isn't the thing you do at the end. It's the thing you do in the middle, before anyone says thank you, before anyone sees." He never rehearsed. He just remembered. And they listened, because kindness had come back, not to reward him, to join him. By the time summer cooled into fall, Eli had stopped counting days, not because they blurred together, but because they finally felt whole. There were no countdowns. No more, just get through this. There were mornings with coffee, afternoons with sketchbooks, evenings with laughter that didn't feel borrowed. He didn't call it happiness. He called it enough. Enough food, enough sleep, enough peace to stop bracing for the next thing to go wrong. It had taken time to believe it, but slowly, gently, the fear faded. Even his body stopped flinching at loud doors. One morning, as he packed his bag for school, he found a crumpled dollar in the lining. Old, stained, folded a dozen times. It was one of the first bills he ever saved on the street. He held it, ran his fingers along the crease. Then he tucked it into a book on his shelf, not to forget, but to remember. Lucas caught him doing it. "Old memory?" "Old promise," Eli replied. At school, he'd become something of a quiet legend, not for what he'd survived, but for how he showed up. A new student asked him what it felt like to go from the sidewalk to Thornhill Academy. Eli shrugged. "It's just different pavement." "But don't you feel proud?" the student asked. "I feel lucky," Eli said. "But luck didn't get me here." The student frowned. "Then what did?" Eli smiled. "One decision. One moment. That's all it takes." The student never forgot that. Neither did the teacher who overheard. That week, they made a bulletin board called "One Moment That Mattered." Students filled it with slips of paper. "I told my mom I loved her." I asked a kid to sit with us. I didn't laugh when someone tripped. Eli pinned one too. Just one. It read, I moved before the car did. No signature. No decoration. But everyone knew whose it was. Mr. Thornhill, meanwhile, had changed too. His boardroom tone had softened. He paused more. Listened longer. He didn't use Eli's name in interviews. He didn't market the adoption. But every now and then, he'd close a deal and think, none of this feels as real as that boy's smile. He told his assistant one day, legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what lives because of you. She nodded, then added, your son lives like that every day. At home, Eli started cooking. Nothing fancy. Just eggs, toast, sometimes rice with garlic. He liked the sound of a pan heating, the smell of real food, the feeling of being able to make something from nothing. He asked the housekeeper to teach him how to fold laundry properly. Not because anyone asked him to, because it felt right, because it was good to do, not just receive. One Saturday, Lucas caught him cleaning the windows. You know we have people for that, right? Eli wiped a streak and said, I used to sit on the other side of glass like this. I think about that sometimes. Lucas didn't argue. He just grabbed a second towel and joined him. That fall, Eli got a letter from his old librarian, Ms. Chan. She'd retired, moved to the coast, but she still remembered. You were my reminder that quiet people hold big stories, and that sometimes the best thing we can do is give them space to write them. Eli wrote back, you were the first adult who didn't ask me where I came from, just where I wanted to sit. They wrote each other monthly after that. One evening, as golden light poured through the living room window, Mr. Thornhill asked Eli to sit with him. I've been thinking about the adoption, he said. Eli stiffened, just slightly. Legally, it's all settled, but I never asked what you wanted. You didn't have to, Eli said. I want to now. Eli looked out the window, then at the man beside him. I don't care about the paperwork, or the name. What matters is, he paused, swallowed. What matters is you never made me feel temporary. Mr. Thornhill didn't speak. He just reached over, placed his hand gently on Eli's shoulder, and left it there. The seasons turned. Eli kept sketching. He drew classmates, strangers, memories. One drawing showed two boys walking home, one in a blazer, one in second-hand shoes, their shadows long and joined. Another showed a bench, empty but warm. His final sketch of the year was small, just a hand, palm open, reaching forward. Beneath it he wrote, I never asked for much, just a moment to matter. And somehow, he got everything he ever needed. It didn't end with applause. It didn't end with headlines or medals or some final dramatic goodbye. Eli's story ended the way he lived, quietly, deliberately, with presence. Because it wasn't really an ending at all. It was just the last page of one chapter, and the start of something else. By the time he turned 12, most people forgot the exact date of the rescue. Even some of the new students at Thornhill didn't know why his name felt familiar. He liked it that way. He never wanted to be a symbol. He just wanted to belong. One crisp autumn morning, Eli walked through the gates of Thornhill Academy alone. Lucas had stayed home with a cold. The wind tugged gently at his coat. He looked taller now, not because he'd grown, but because he'd stopped looking down. Near the back of the campus, by the courtyard where the mentorship group met, stood a small plaque on a wooden bench. It read, to the boy who moved first, and never looked back. No name, no title, but everyone who mattered knew exactly who it was for. Eli sat there for a moment, ran his fingers along the grain of the wood, thought of every bench he'd slept on, every curb he'd waited beside. Then he smiled, because this one wasn't for waiting. It was for staying. That winter, he returned to 6th and Porter. The mural was still there, the one with the open hands. Someone had added a new panel beside it. A young boy, hoodie too big, shoes too small, holding the hand of a second boy dressed sharply, caught mid-run. Eli stared at it for a long time, then took out his notebook and added a new sketch of the mural itself, framed by the sidewalk and the traffic and the people who never stopped long enough to see. He wrote under it, I saw it, even when no one else did. In early spring, He received a letter from a school in another state. A teacher had started a club based on his drawings, sketch and see. Students were paired with elderly residents in assisted living homes, and they traded portraits for stories. They called it a kindness loop. Eli sent back a dozen new illustrations. And a note. People forget faces, but not how they were seen. Lucas eventually got better and returned to school. When he did, Eli walked beside him, same as always. No fanfare, just friendship. At lunch, a new student hesitated to sit near them. Eli smiled. "Come on," he said. "We've got room." The student looked unsure. "What if I don't belong?" Eli's answer was simple. "Then we make space until you do." That summer, he spent 2 weeks volunteering at a camp for kids from shelters. He didn't tell them his story. He just listened to theirs. One boy said, "You're really quiet for a leader." Eli grinned. "I lead better when I let people speak first." When he left, the campers gave him a notebook. "Blank pages. Fill it with more people," one girl said. He did. Back in the city, someone tagged his mural with graffiti. The school was furious. Volunteers came to scrub it, but Eli stopped them. "Leave it," he said. "Why?" "Because it proves it was real." He didn't want to be polished. He wanted to be remembered honestly. Smudges and all. A city street with an early morning setting. Eli Carter, barefoot and in motion, is sprinting toward a boy in a crisp blazer who is about to run into traffic. Eli's body is leaning forward in the middle of the street, arms outstretched to push the boy to safety. In the background, a black SUV is turning quickly towards the boy, but it is still far away, creating a sense of urgency. The street is busy, with a few pedestrians blurred in the background, but the focus is on Eli and the boy. Eli's face shows determination, and the boy looks startled. The lighting is soft, reflecting the early morning light, casting shadows and emphasizing the movement and tension in the scene.